to Level Up and Live, the podcast where we navigate the fine line between risk and recklessness to achieve success. I'm your host, Sean Myers, joined by my co-host, Ewan Heinemeyer. And today, we're tackling a crucial topic, how to win big without getting wrecked. Join us as we explore strategies for calculated risk-taking and avoiding the pitfalls of reckless behavior. Learn how to seize opportunities, make informed decisions, and elevate your life to new heights. Get ready to embrace the thrill of the chase while safeguarding your future.
So you sit down at the poker table, you just took out $1,000 of your bank account, you sit down and you get your first two cards. You look at them and you're like, suddenly realize, what have I done? What am I doing here? I don't even know how to play this game. There's other guys around the table. They look like they know what they're doing. And how do you feel at that moment? You probably feel like you've probably made a bad decision. And what you have just done with your $1,000 is reckless. You just stepped into a realm that you don't understand and you hoped to get lucky, which is not a great strategy for life. On the other hand, and I'm going to talk about my personal experience with poker, and this is just one of the best, like, brutal, raw analogies that I could come up with. It's risky for someone else. It's not risky. It's reckless for someone else to play if they've never played before. I remember when poker was really popular, I read books, I studied, I played hundreds of thousands of hands. You could still play online at this time. And I got really, really good. I just understood the game, I understood the math, understood people, and combining that together, I really understood what I was doing. I lost money at the beginning because that's what you do, and I lost minimal amount. And I don't play poker anymore. But the last number of times that I played, last few times I've been at a casino, I 5x my money every time I sat down. The last 5 times I went to a casino, and I don't encourage anyone to do that. PS, like, I was just fascinated with it at the time. It was like a sport, and it is a sport to me. And it's high stakes, right? Like, because there's something on the line, and that just aligned well with morally. I don't know. We could debate that if it's the right thing to do or not. But for this analogy, it wasn't risky for me. The risk wasn't that high for me to sit down at those poker tables, because I understood what it was that I was doing. And I was able to put larger amounts of money in because I understood that what I was going to plan on doing. Right. And so if you go back to the first thing I said, if you sat down and you didn't know what you're doing, let's just say $1,000, you didn't have a clue what you're doing with other people, and you sat down with me, for example, well, that would be reckless because you don't understand what the game is. So today we're going to talk about the risk to reward, and there's things that you can go risky or you can go reckless. And this is huge because successful people always risk. There's not a single successful person out there that hasn't risked something, and risk is required to win big. You have to have risk. And the flip side of that is, well, I don't want to be reckless. I don't want to risk. And reckless is so bad that I'm going to do nothing. Well, that's reckless to me. That is reckless, because if you do nothing, you're guaranteed to lose. And the world is not your friend when it comes to inflation, right? Your money is worth less every single day. And so if you're not doing something, investing, building knowledgeable skills, hanging around people who do know what they're doing so that you can get that same benefit, right? Because you become like the people you hang around with. That's what this episode is about. So I said all that. We've got 5 points that Sean put together. I think they're brilliant, and we're going to go through them. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you're going to understand that if maybe you've not been risking enough, and if you've not been, don't be reckless. Get knowledgeable, get the skills, get around people who know what they're doing so that you can have that risk tolerance to succeed and have success in your life. So, Sean, you want to hit us up with the first point?
Yeah, man. So this aligns perfectly with your analogy with the poker table, right? So there was a time where you didn't know anything about poker before sitting down at the table, right? And so this first tip is setting a clear goal. So I'm curious, with you going into play poker for the first time, did you have a clear goal or a clear outcome that you wanted to when you sat down in that chair?
Super clear. And that's why it's such a great analogy. And I had to use it because there's many other things that would be true in the same way. But with poker, the clear goal is to win money. I wanted to win. I wanted that money, right? Is that not what everybody does? I'm going into business for myself so I can be free, like the money. Like, I want the money. I'm going to sacrifice. I'm going to risk not having a good time with this food so I can get the return of getting healthy, right? Like there's a form of risk there, right? Like social alienation. So yeah, very clear goal. I wanted to win money,
So you
right?
wanted to win money, right? But however, when you first sat down versus the time that you sat down for the 50th time, how much more confident were you with that goal in the
100%.
outcome,
Yeah.
right? Because of the experience, the environment that you surrounded yourself in, you became a product of that environment, whether you learned from your peers, whether you studied the body language, whether you looked
Mm-hmm.
at like, are they bluffing? Are they not bluffing? You concentrated on your breathing, you concentrated from experience. And
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that I'm thinking about right now that has really just leveled us up is the mastermind group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being the product of the environment, plugging ourselves in and into that environment. Now, when I think about setting a clear goal, right? Sometimes that if you don't know what that goal is or that outcome and you plug yourself in, to me, it comes back to, well, why are you plugging yourself into that
Mm-hmm.
environment? Why are you plugging yourself in? And it's different for everybody, right? For you, for playing poker is because of the money, right? And so for me, it's like when I plug myself in, why did I want to start a mastermind group? Why did I want to plug myself in? Why do I want to come to this and show up every single week? Because I've seen the progress, because I've seen the outcomes, because I've seen what it's done for my life, not
You
just in one
minimize the
area.
risk. Putting your time, energy, effort, and money into socializing with people who have succeeded. You know that's worth the money to be around those people. In fact, I don't want to be in the room where no one's willing to put the money in, right? Because you're going to be around a bunch of people who aren't willing to do that. What can I learn from them, right? In the sense of business, like where if money is the outcome or success in that area or whatever the goal is, I'm willing to spend the same amount of money that those people are as well because they have the same level of commitment, right? And they also have done their due diligence knowing that their return, that their outcome is going to be the same. They want to elevate themselves, like in a mastermind, just as an example, they're going to elevate themselves. It's going to increase their profits, going to increase their just their all aspects of life if that's what they're going for, right? Like what we talk about. I'll say with the poker though, I started off with a small amount of money because I knew even up front, well, I'm not going to put everything in because if I lose, I'll have nothing left to play with. So
Mm,
I knew I needed to learn. I knew I wasn't going to be excellent off the bat. I was just intrigued. I enjoyed it. And so I'm going to put a minimal amount in and I would regularly lose. I'd go with $50, lose it. But what did I learn? I learned something valuable. So when I go back with the next $50 and lose that too, I learned another thing, right? And it stings to lose real money. It stings to put yourself in the game. But if I didn't continue to learn, educate myself to get my outcome, to risk a little bit to get a big reward, I never would have been able to go in and put larger amounts in. And I know we're talking about poker here, but it's true in anything. Like to buy a course, right? Someone won't spend $1,000 or $2,000 to get a course that helps them build a product or a service that they could go then make $200,000. They won't spend the 2 grand because they think it's too risky. Well, what if it doesn't work out? Right. And so they have not narrowed the gap. So, yeah, I think, like you said, setting a clear goal, what is it you want, and then figuring out what am I willing to risk to, to get it. Right. Because you're going to have to
yeah,
risk something time, energy, money. So, yeah, setting
yeah.
goals. So the risk
Well, and that
management
goal,
side would be point two. Or go ahead. What were you going to say there?
yeah, and that goal is aligned with, right, the why, like we've preached before. It's like, okay, what is the macro? The micro is the goal. What's the macro, right? So you wanted the money. Okay, well, see, if you really dig deeper on that, like, well, what is the money for, right? To pay for baby diapers, to put food on the table for the family. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
macro of that, right? Which kept you showing up. And of course, everything else that came with it. This leads into our second tip, which is risk management. And you already hit the nail right, or the hammer on the nail, and talked about minimizing risk, playing with $50, not going in there and dropping 20 grand. When I think about that, it's like starting a business or investing in crypto. You're going to go out. I think today crypto is at 60 grand. You're going to go out and buy a $60,000 crypto if you know nothing about it. To me, if you know nothing about it, you're going to go drop 60 grand. That's recklessness, right?
Yeah.
And so it's minimizing those risks. Go drop $50 and learn from it, right? It's going up, it's going down, and check your emotions. Same thing with you playing the analogy with poker, right? How are you feeling? How are you showing up investing that $50? How is your
Mm-hmm.
emotions showing up, right? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, we could flip it too to like we said right before the podcast. Now I'm confident to sit down at a poker table and play with X amount. But if it was an insurance agency and I was going to buy someone's insurance agency for $100,000, that would be mega reckless of me. I've known nothing about it. In fact, the first thing I would do about anything with insurance is call you. And then I know the first thing you do is call someone else because you don't want to, you like, I remove myself from insurance because you have a great system process. You've built a phenomenal business where you don't need to know much, which is a whole different topic. But you could put 100 grand into an insurance agency and it would be almost no risk to you. It would be almost a guarantee that you're going to input your systems, your processes, because you're experienced, right? You've already done the risk portion on a small level. You risked a small amount and built, right? And it wasn't a small amount that you put in, PS. Like, you really put yourself out there. But now it would be very minimal for you to put in however many dollars to buy however many insurance agencies, right? So it's not just poker, it's everything like that you've built experience around. And look what you had to risk, though. You still had to put 100,000 out, or you still had to put your 45 grand in, or your 20 grand or your 10 to go do something else. And you wouldn't have had any of the success that you had without the
Yeah.
risk. To go back to earlier, like, if you're not risking something of somewhat or preparing to risk, you're being reckless right now. Like, if you're listening to this, if you're not doing anything, you're going to pay the price. Like, with the way the economy is going in the future, the way the world works. My wife was just saying her mom used to sweep floors for $7. Sweep floors at a salon for $7 a week. $7 a week.
Mm.
Well, what can you do with $7 a week now? Nothing. You can't even buy a burger for $7. So what's it going to be in 20 years? Your money today, if it's not growing, if you're not risking building something, your money's going to be worthless today, right? So you have to be smart with it. So, yeah, risk management.
Risk management, man. That leads into our third, which is, so you can have the clear goal, you can have the risk management, and then the third one is resilience building. So this is basically we're all, as individuals, are going to have setbacks. It's not always going to be rainbows and sunshines, right? Using the analogies that we've had starting
Yeah,
a
the insurance
business.
agency. What was like for you? I would love to hear, because I know you're putting everything on the line with the insurance agency when you first started. Lots of big dollars that you had invested, and didn't know all the things yet. So what was, as far as we're building resilience, like, what lessons did you get there?
Yeah. So the first thing that came to mind is when I, like, for me, like, failure was not an option, right? And what that means to me is that everything that was going on a daily basis from the time I got up to the time I went to bed was just micro, right? Whether it was task, goals, hiring, marketing, advertising, that was just all micro. That was just a
Mm,
part of the process. That was just what I needed to do to get to where I wanted to go, right? The macro, and that's why I preach that all the time, because that's what kept me getting up, man. That's what kept me getting, that's what kept me going, right? And then align that with resilience building, because we are going to have setbacks. We are going to
mm,
have obstacles. We're going to have struggles in every area of life. But what keeps you going? What's the macro in these different areas of life? What gets you up every morning when you don't feel like it? Right. And so when I think about that, for me, over the years of doing what I've done, right, and building these businesses, is what systems and processes can I put in place, not only at the insurance company, Ewan, but in different areas of my life, meaning spirituality. I need to go to
mm,
church. I need to surround
mm,
myself with pastors. I need to plug myself in with devotionals, reading the Bible, business, health and fitness. What do I need to do there? Hire a training coach, do a program, go to competitions, plug myself into ultras, right? Business. If I want to grow my business as an entrepreneur and I want to be a lifestyle entrepreneur and I want to have the financial freedom, the time freedom, what's the number one thing to do there? Build a mastermind group. Be a part of a mastermind group, right? Because I know,
mm,
I know I'm going to have failures. I'm going to have setbacks. So if I'm trying to do life alone, like I was without all this systems, processes, and mastermind groups, then to me, it's a number of things. It's a number of variables. It's a recipe for disaster. It's the rat race. You're just existing, everything that we preach. When I started implementing these things in my life, then the setbacks, the failures, the obstacles, now it's just like, that's just part of the journey. That's just
mm.
embracing the suck. And it
Mhm.
just makes life that much sweeter.
Yeah. It doesn't knock you out. Like it can knock you
No.
down, but you get back up quickly. And what I love what you said at the start was failure is not an option, which is the mindset that you had, right? Going into to be resilient, you do have to have a large drive, a purpose, a goal. And that goal has to be that serious, right? Like otherwise it's just going to be another flop, right? It's going to be another reckless move. And so to improve your odds of risk to reward and to minimize the risk, you have to have what your attitude has to be rock solid, right? It can be, it's nothing's guaranteed. That's why this is risky, PS, right? Like for people listening, it's not going to feel like a guarantee. You're going to have to risk at some point. It's not going to feel good. But yet, so if that's true, you got to go in with that mindset that you just had right there. Like you have to know this could be tough. I'm going to get knocked down, but that's not going to stop me. I'm going to continue. And I think that's where a lot of people, they had not checked in with themselves before they've made big moves, and they've maybe had failures in the past and not continued to succeed because they hadn't continued. That's the whole problem, right? They got knocked down and stayed down because they didn't realize the level of commitment required up front to succeed. It's going to be,
Yeah.
to have success is going to be brutal. But what is also going to be brutal is not trying at all, right? Being reckless, like we already talked about, doing nothing is reckless,
Yeah.
right? So you don't get to just sit there and be like, well, I don't want to risk. You're already risking too much, right? By not doing anything, not trying to build something, preparing for the future with your health, right? Like it's reckless to not look at your health, like to just ignore it. Is the risk is super high into the reckless portion there. So yeah, mindset cannot fail, or maybe it's not, failure's not an option. I love that you think like that, because I am along the same tracks, but that might be maybe too much for some people. But maybe it's like whatever aligns with your values. PS, let's say that, because I don't know what other people think, right? Like go back to our last week's episode for the values. PS, DM us, we'll send it to you, or go Google your own, get your values. And what we're talking about today will definitely help. I didn't think about this until now. The risk to reward versus being reckless, your values will help guide you on that.
Yeah,
Just clicked.
100%. It just makes things sweeter, right? And it just makes things, in my mind, the way it works and the way I try to show up is how can I make it to where I set myself up for the best chance of success, right? Because I know how life is without these things. I know how life is when I don't have the resilience, when I don't have the clear goal, when I don't have, the understanding of I am the product of my environment, and I try to seclude myself, and I stay in solitude too much,
It's like
right?
punishment.
It's a punishment, man. And then, things start happening, right? Your thoughts, and then you start justifying, self-doubt creeps in, negativity, and then you spiral out of control, right? And you pick your head up. And so for me, that's why I keep mentioning systems and processes, because I have that implemented in these different areas of life. And so I just think it's so important. And then resilience for me, it's like, I think we've talked about this behind the scenes. It's a skill set, right? And it can be learned. And we talked about this with Matt yesterday evening on the podcast about, this guy's been doing it, what he's doing for 15, 20 years. And we asked him, what's the key ingredient? He said, I just show up. This guy's
I
got
love
over
that.
130,000 subscribers on his YouTube, which is fantastic. And so you hear that, and that's why I preach that. We teach that. And even I say it because it helps me, right? Because I'm just speaking to my younger self. You just got to show up, whether that's with your wife or your spouse, or health and fitness, going to the gym, doing 2 push-ups and leaving, going to shoot a podcast, going to the mastermind group. If you just show up when you don't feel like it, if you're sick, if you're like, I got other priorities in my life, but there's a reason why you have that system in place for a reason. Like, I'll be completely transparent. There's some days where I'm like, dude, I don't want to go to church, man. I don't want to go to church. I don't know why I'm going. I can just stay home today. And Ewan's raising his hand right now because he's
We're
the same way.
introverts.
But then when I go to church, bro, I'm like, I'll see somebody there that smiles at me, that comes up and says, hey, listen to the podcast. It's made a big impact on my life. I'm like, if I wouldn't have went to church, this guy would have never been able to come to me, and I would have never met this guy. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it's just taking away these different things in our life. It's like, okay, when you don't feel like it, but if it's aligned with what you said, like the values and your beliefs, then just show up, right? And mitigate. And if you just showed, I think about your poker, right? Or poker or business. If you just show up and you play with 25 bucks, 50 bucks, you're going to learn so much by just showing up in that regards. And you're going to build that momentum. You're going to build that confidence. And you, like I said, become the product in that environment. And this leads into our next tip, which is seeking mentorship.
And it's like comes right back to, there's no better way to describe it. Like, well, if you were wanting to play poker and you hadn't played, I don't think you've played much poker before.
Mm-mm.
After knowing my experience, I know you would probably come to me, right?
100%.
And if you got better than me, right, and you start beating me, we would both be like, well, who do we need to talk to next, right? Because that if it's who, not how, right? Who's gonna? And so to flip it back to the insurance agency, if I wanted to build an insurance agency, my first immediate thing, I'm not picking up a book. I'm not going to Google it. I'm going to come straight to you, right, for insurance, because you will get me there light years faster than anybody else. And we would do the same thing for any other area of life, like food, for example. You went to a nutritionist, right? Now you know, like, if you were to do that all over again on the food side, that would be the first thing to do quickly, because they're going to get you all the nooks and crannies, all the macros, all the things that you need to know. They're going to get it for you so much faster. So mentorship, it reduces your risk of what you would have to spend in time doing it on your own.
Yeah.
That's the real risk right there. If you're not seeking mentorship, you're being reckless with your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there's one surefire payoff by seeing someone. The only reason you go to a mentor is to speed everything up.
Yeah.
That's all they do for you, is speed everything up. And so you'd have to think it's worth spending X amount of dollars. Let's say you want to make $100,000. Would it be worth spending 10 to give to that mentor? But people won't do it. Why will people not do it? Sean, what would be your thought process on that?
I think about when you ask that question, I think about myself, right? And so for 35 years, why didn't I didn't want to exchange that monetary value. I didn't want to exchange that value. In my mind, the first reason that comes to my mind is there's so much noise, and there's so much resources and tools available to us, Ewan, that I think we can figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
You have heard of all these DIYs. I can YouTube it, right? I mean, you've talked about this behind the scenes.
Shout out to Nato.
Exactly. Shout out to Nato, right? And so without him, without the who, without reaching out to a mentor like himself, then I feel like we dig ourselves a hole and we get stuck. And then what happens when we get stuck and we dig ourselves a hole? We procrastinate. We've talked about that before. We drag our feet, and discouragement, self-doubt, all this stuff creeps in. And then we wonder why in 5-10 years, we don't get to where we want to be. Time freedom, financial freedom. When we're angry, we're frustrated, our spiritual life hasn't improved, our marriage hasn't improved. It's because we haven't sought counseling, therapist, mentorship. Why? And it's different for everybody, but I think that was for me. It's like, oh, I can figure it all on my own. My dad was and it goes back to childhood. So if you look at your childhood, right, and how you were raised, my dad was big on DIY. I'm doing everything myself, from building the house, from the electrician, the plumber, everything, man, taxes. Like, I'm just sitting here going, man, no, I'm trying to hire and outsource to the people that know how to do this the best. And I just want to focus on 2 or 3 different things. Now, what I just said right there is because I've sought mentorship and I've learned that in the journey. That's the only way I've learned that. Not from listening.
And so quickly. Like,
quickly.
You've done so much so fast, because you literally, like, you'll just shut your brain down and be like, I don't want to spend an ounce of thought on this. I'm going to go to somebody that already knows, and I'll just take what they do. And then you do it. And so you spend zero time like flailing around.
And it's only been the last 2 years, man. Yeah. Before that, it was like, amazing. I was trying to do everything on my own. And now it's like, these last 2 years have been the best. And I've shared this on other podcasts, have been the best years of my life. I've had setbacks. I've had challenges. I've had obstacles just like anybody. But like I've said, I've put systems and processes and people in place. And now I've just speed up the process in going through those obstacles, right? I'm not stuck on that obstacle, Ewan, for months.
Yeah. Man, and if you look at any of the people that we like to talk about, like Hormozi, Ed Milet, Dan Martell, Dean Graziosi, Tony Robbins, they've all spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to the person above them that taught them what they know today. Every single one of them spent multi six figures in mentorship. And now that's the only reason we know their names, is because they were willing to spend the money to get what it is that they needed to learn to go not 10x, 100, maybe 1,000x what it was they had. They're all, worth 100 million. And they all say it was thanks to this guy. It was thanks to that guy. And I spent money with them.
Yeah.
They taught me.
So when I hear you say that, I'm sitting here thinking like I got my earbuds in the ears. And I'm like, oh yeah. Okay, dude. That's what everybody says. Everybody says, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, that we hear that all the time from influencers, from podcasts. We get it. They spend a lot of money. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. Right. But on the flip side of that, so you hear even us to this day, like hearing like Alex Hormozy and all these guys, like some of these things, they don't even register in my mind. I'm like, what? I'm like, you'd have to do this, this, and this. Like, and then when I dissect it, I'm like, oh, well, this is, I don't understand the perspective of it, right? I don't understand it because it's what I don't know is what I don't know.
Yeah.
The times that I've had just took the leap of faith, right? And done everything that we've talked about today and take that leap of faith of just investing in myself, everything changes for the better, right? And so
100%.
And everybody's different in different seasons. I've talked about this a lot. Everybody's in different seasons of life. And so whatever season of life that you're in, just for me, it's like dissecting it, pulling the layers back and going, okay, what is one simple thing that I can do to mitigate the risk of taking action on improving this area of life, and then do it, right? And then speeding up that process in the mentorship. And our final tip for it is balancing the ambition and well-being. You want to speak to that and kind of wrap things up?
Yeah, because when we're talking about risk and being reckless, you have to think about all other areas of life. You can't do it at the detriment of other areas, because then you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You have to look at all elements. So to me, you have to make sure, like we talked about earlier, you really have to have clear goals. Because if you just set it on that one deal, well, let's say if there's 5 other areas and you're only focused on that one, well, then you just gonna messed up all the other 4, right? So you'd have to take that into the risk equation, because then you'd be reckless in all and the other areas, and that wouldn't be worth it, right? The risk would not be worth that, because then you might get your outcome, but you're not going to get the result. And to me, to flip it back real quick, like a lot of people might be having a hard time connecting paying the money. And here's a mic drop moment. We all did it when we went to college. We spent a fortune. Why? Because the mentors, we call them professors, call them teachers. They're mentors, right? They know what they're doing. We go to see them to speed everything up, right? And there's multiple different classes. There's not just one mentor. You know, in college and have one guy or one woman tell you everything. There's multiple different classes, right? There's multiple different areas, right? So you want to be balanced in the areas that it is that you're going to be pursuing, right? Like for whatever is the goal, to go back to number 1, setting clear goals, to have a life that is fulfilled in all areas, right? So that is part of the equation. Right? With risk, you got to calculate.
Yeah, 100%, man. I couldn't agree with you more. When I think of ambition, it's like what fires you up, what keeps you going, what keeps you driving, what keeps you moving the needle forward, right? Because some people, I heard this on another podcast, some people are just like, for me, it's like, I don't struggle with ambition. I don't struggle with drive. I don't struggle with focus. I don't struggle with intention, right? But there is other areas that I struggle with that I have to be intentional about. And so that's why I've had to create the systems and process, right? Like I have struggled in the past. I'm a lone wolf. I want to do things on my own. I'm a DIYer. I'll figure it out, and I'll drive myself crazy. So I've had to plug myself in to allow me to continue this ambition, to continue to show up and manage these areas of my life, right? And so, it was foreign to me up until 2 years ago about mastermind groups and these different things that I've plugged myself into. And once I understood, like, oh, this is just part of who I want to become. And then along the way, I can pay it forward, serve and impact others as well. And we're going to all level up and live. right, in this area of life.
And look at all the results. Look at the results.
Exactly.
In such a short period of time too, paying off. What's it going to be in another 2 years and another 10, doing this over and over? The version of you that doesn't versus the version of you that does. We always say it, light years.
Yep.
And you would ask, well, was it worth it investing? Was it worth the risk to put the time, the money, the energy?
Dude, I would have paid 10x. I say this all the time. Like when I first got into coaching and when I invested in myself into coaching, like it's so interesting. I see people reach out to me all the time and they ask about coaching, they ask about maths, and that's where the wall goes up. It's like, I don't know. I want to be a part of it, but I don't want to swipe the card, right? I don't want to pay. And so that's what fascinates me because I felt the same way. I was like, oh, I don't want to let loose of I think it was like $3,000 or whatever it was. I don't want to let loose of that. And then, but that is the leap of faith. At that point, I have mitigated everything, right? I have mitigated the risk. I've set the clear goal. I've sought mentorship. I have covered these. Go back and listen to this episode and cover these 5 tips. That's exactly what I did. And then when that time came, it's not going to be 100%. You're going to be 80% of the way. And that's when you're going to be like, okay, time to take the leap of faith. There's, I've weighed everything out that I possibly can. It's time to move forward. It's time to take action.
What's funny is that you spent the $3,000, you've already more than 10x. This is just a blatant fact right now. Like if people don't connect it, they don't understand. I already know you've made more than $30,000 since you spent that 3 because of you spending the 3. 100%. You've made significantly more than the $30,000 back. So there's just hard numbers. And people say, well, how did he do it? Well, when you spend the money, you will figure out like, oh, that's what they were talking about. You don't need any more knowledge. You need to get yourself in the game and risk something. And then you get to find the benefits, the glorious. Those who are bold and risk, they get the treats, man. They get the gold. And if you don't do it, you're just going to keep dreaming about it.
Yeah. So with all that being said, get off the sidelines, get in the game.
Do something.
And level up and live.
Amen. Level up and live.
Thanks for tuning in to the Level Up and Live podcast. If you found today's episode insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode for more valuable insights on personal and professional growth. Leave us a review, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube for more inspiration. And share this episode with a friend who's ready to take calculated risk and win big. Remember, success favors the bold, but wisdom ensures longevity. Level up and live.